The room was suffused with a palpable sense of disquiet, an ambiance amplified by the dim glow of computer monitors casting ghostly pallors on the faces of the containment specialists. Staff at Site-19, the most secure SCP Foundation facility, were no strangers to crises. However, what unfurled on the screens before them transcended conventional calamities. News channels, scientific reports, internal memos, every medium painted the same harrowing tableau. An outbreak, virulent and inexplicable, had gripped the town of Hampton Falls and was metastasizing at an alarming rate. Dr. Laura Simmons, director of containment, stood before her colleagues, her visage stern yet tinged with a modicum of trepidation. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice barely rising above a whisper, "our mandate has always been to secure, contain, and protect. Yet, what we're faced with today defies containment as we know it. The CDC, WHO, no one has answers. We might be dealing with a biohazard that could potentially become an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario." As the weight of her words settled, a cacophony of counter-arguments and recommendations filled the room. Scientists and strategists alike discussed quarantine protocols, sterilization techniques, and even, though voiced hesitantly, termination strategies. It was Dr. Michael Hargrove, a venerable virologist with decades of experience, who dared vocalize the thought lurking in everyone's mind. Have we considered utilizing an SCP for research into a cure? A silence thick as molasses enveloped the room. Ethical paradigms had always been a contentious matter within the Foundation. Utilizing SCPs for any form of benefit was not just a breach of protocol. It was a philosophical dilemma that struck at the very core of their mission. "Are you suggesting we let the monsters out of their cages?" questioned Dr. Simmons, her eyes narrowing. "In controlled settings, under stringent protocols, yes," replied Dr. Hargrove, undeterred. "Our options are diminishing as fast as the rate of infection. And we already have a containment breach of sorts, the breach of a disease we don't understand. I propose we consult SCP-049. It has, whether we like it or not, an intimate understanding of pathology that surpasses our own." Simmons looked around the room, gauging the consternation and reluctant agreement on the faces surrounding her. She took a deep breath, knowing the gravity of the decision that weighed on her shoulders. "Very well," she said finally. "Prepare SCP-049 for initial consultation. But make no mistake, we are treading on fragile ethical ground. One misstep, and we won't just be battling a plague, we'll be courting catastrophe." Within the bowels of Site-19, the news of the decision trickled down to SCP-049's containment chamber. Guards heightened security protocols while researchers donned their hazmat suits, the sterile atmosphere clashing with the murky ethical waters they were wading into. As the heavy door to SCP-049's chamber unsealed, the Plague Doctor looked up, its eyes, two dark voids in a mask of faux medievalism, seeming to twinkle with a blend of curiosity and anticipation. Dr. Sarah Greene, the researcher assigned to this volatile task, took a cautious step into the chamber. Armed with a voice recorder and a clinical detachment that veiled her own ethical qualms, she initiated the consultation. "SCP-049, we have a proposition for you. One that involves your expertise in diseases." The Plague Doctor turned away from its current project. A dissected rat splayed open in a grotesque display of curiosity and faced her. "A proposition, you say? How tantalizing," it replied, its voice tinged with an archaic cadence. "I presume this has to do with the novel pestilence I've sensed in the air." Dr. Greene couldn't suppress a shiver. How much did SCP-049 know, and what ramifications would unfold from this unholy alliance? Yet, even as doubt clouded her judgment, she couldn't ignore the virulent fact. They were out of options. "Yes," she answered. "Would you be interested in collaborating on finding a cure?" SCP-049 paused, its face unreadable behind its beak-like mask. Then, It spoke, each word heavy with implication. "Ah, Dr. Greene, you have no idea how long I've waited for this moment. To cure a pestilence most vile, that is my purpose, my raison d'être. I accept your proposition." As Dr. Greene exited the chamber, her heart pounding with a cocktail of dread and relief, she wondered at the Pandora's box they had just flung open. Was this a necessary evil? A devil's bargain struck for the greater good? Or had they crossed an irrevocable line, the consequences of which would only manifest in due time? Finally, a worthy adversary. But will they let me conquer it? Thought SCP-049 as it looked at the closing chamber door, already contemplating the arcane science it would soon employ. Site-19's underground complex buzzed with an anomalous blend of urgency and foreboding. Corridors teeming with researchers, guards, and D-class personnel led to a specially retrofitted chamber, a setting morphed from a prison to a perverse laboratory. The sanctum for their new hazardous collaboration, SCP-049. Dr. Sarah Greene stood before the containment chamber's entrance, her protective gear rustling as if echoing her inner turbulence. Her hands tightened around the digital voice recorder and a dossier containing initial observations about the spreading disease. The door unsealed with a mechanical sigh, and she stepped inside. "Good afternoon, SCP-049, she greeted, her voice tinged with a professional warmth she hardly felt. "Ah, Dr. Greene," SCP-049 replied, its speech imbued with a curious mix of antiquated formality and barely veiled excitement. "Eager to commence our venture, are we?" "Let's get to the point," Dr. Greene responded, setting aside pleasantries. "We have brought you samples of the infected tissue and the patient's consent forms. The Foundation expects actionable results and, I should stress, complete transparency from your end." SCP-049 approached the table where the samples were placed. It gingerly touched the petri dish, its gloved finger tracing the outline as if feeling the texture of a rare manuscript. "Excellent. I presume we can get started right away?" "Under close supervision, yes," she clarified. "2 armed guards will be present at all times. Every move you make will be recorded, both for scientific evaluation and for security." SCP-049 sighed, a sound like the rustling of old parchment. "Very well. Limitations are but stepping stones for mastery. Let us begin." As Dr. Greene took her position behind the protective glass, she couldn't suppress her qualms. The Plague Doctor was infamous not just for its unorthodox methods, but also for its mercurial temperament. Today, it appeared focused, meticulously laying out its archaic instruments. Scalpels resembling medieval torture devices, syringes that looked more like alchemical apparatuses, and vials containing unknown substances that defied scientific classification. The D-class subject, a terminally ill volunteer from a high-security prison, was wheeled in, his eyes filled with a cocktail of dread and hope. Dr. Greene hit the record button as SCP-049 began its procedure. Minutes felt like hours. Hours that were a tapestry of scientific audacity and ethical ambiguity. SCP-049 hummed an eerie tune, its beak mask bent over the subject as it administered an assortment of serums and conducted a series of incisions. Finally, it stepped back, a semblance of satisfaction coloring its tone. "Preliminary treatment administered. We shall observe." It took 3 days for the results to manifest. The D-class subject, previously on the verge of multiple organ failures, displayed significant improvements. However, it was far from a complete cure. His symptoms had abated, but tests still showed traces of the infection, mutated, but not eradicated. A meeting was convened, and Dr. Greene presented the findings to the Oversight Committee. Arguments flared and skepticism brimmed. Yet, the bottom line remained. SCP-049 had made progress, limited but undeniably more than any contemporary methods had achieved. It needs more time, possibly more freedom to experiment, Dr. Greene found herself saying, shocked at her own words. "Do we really want to loosen the leash?" Dr. Simmons asked, her eyes locked onto Dr. Greene's. In controlled increments, she replied. I'll take full responsibility. As Dr. Greene returned to SCP-049's chamber, she couldn't escape the sensation of being on a precipice, a threshold beyond which lay either revolutionary success or calamitous failure. I've heard our little endeavor was semi-successful, SCP-049 began before she could speak. Your procedure has potential, but requires refinement, she acknowledged. The Foundation is willing to grant you certain leniencies for further experimentation, but any deviation from our agreement and the entire collaboration will be terminated. SCP-049 seemed to ponder her words, its hidden eyes contemplating invisible horizons. Agreed, it finally said. Ah, Dr. Greene, you're as much a pragmatist as I am a healer. We shall make good partners. She understands, or she believes she does. Either way, it's a start. SCP-049 mused as Dr. Greene exited the chamber. The unholy alliance had been solidified, etching a nebulous path ahead. Neither party could fathom the eventual repercussions of this collaboration, a dance on the edge of scientific innovation and moral decay. While the experimentation led by SCP-049 moved forward in reluctant harmony, the world outside was becoming increasingly discordant. The outbreak had evolved from a public health crisis to a geopolitical dilemma. Governments clashed over accusations of biowarfare, and the international community teetered on the brink of chaos. Underlying it all was a mounting terror, amplified by social media and fringe conspiracy theorists who had begun to unearth and speculate about SCP Foundation's involvement. Dr. Laura Simmons found herself before a video conferencing screen, her eyes meeting those of the O5 Council, the shadowy governing body of the SCP Foundation. The air was thick with digital tension. Progress is slow, but it's happening, she reported, summarizing the data collected from SCP-049's experiments. We believe a viable cure is attainable within a feasible time frame. O5-3, a silhouette against a backdrop of darkness, was the first to respond. The collateral is increasing, Dr. Simmons. Public sentiment is teetering. How long can we maintain secrecy? We're doing our best to suppress information leaks and disseminate disinformation, Simmons replied. But a comprehensive solution would be the cure. It would allow us to control the narrative fully. O5-7 chimed in. And what if SCP-049 turns rogue? Its cooperation is a double-edged sword. We're maintaining strict protocols, Simmons assured. Every action is supervised, every variable accounted for. Except the variable of SCP-049's inherent unpredictability, O5-1 concluded. Proceed, but be prepared for any eventuality. This is a gamble, Dr. Simmons, and the stakes are global. Understood, Simmons said, the screen going dark, leaving her alone with her thoughts and an unsettling sense of foreboding. In SCP-049's chamber, the atmosphere was markedly different, tinged with an odd sense of camaraderie. The plague doctor had just completed a third round of experimental treatment, its methods growing more intricate with each iteration. The D-class subject showed significant improvements. The viral markers had diminished dramatically. An eloquent execution, I must say, SCP-049 commented as it examined the latest set of MRI scans. Your work is showing promise, Dr. Sarah Greene conceded, her scientific curiosity overcoming her initial apprehension. But we'll need to conduct further tests, perhaps even integrate some contemporary methods to ensure reliability and reproducibility. Ah, the hallmarks of modern science, SCP-049 mused. Very well. As long as we continue making strides toward a cure, I am amenable to collaboration. Perhaps they aren't mere charlatans in lab coats. Maybe, just maybe, there's hope for modern medicine yet. SCP-049 thought, its inward reflection a labyrinth of unvoiced judgments and concealed aspirations. As days morphed into weeks, and the world outside grew increasingly unstable, ripples began to manifest within the fabric of Site-19. A series of mysterious power outages affected the lower levels, minor containment breaches occurred, and encrypted servers suffered intermittent failures. It's as though the very architecture of our facility is protesting our actions, Dr. Michael Hargrove remarked during an emergency meeting. Correlation is not causation, Dr. Simmons countered. Our engineers are looking into the malfunctions. Let's not jump to metaphysical conclusions. Yet, the sentiment was hard to shake. It was as if a cosmic tension had settled over Site-19, an ominous undercurrent that many, from security personnel to top-tier scientists, found hard to ignore. In SCP-049's chamber, the atmosphere had shifted too. The Plague Doctor became increasingly reticent, its responses terse, its eyes, black orbs within its mask, more scrutinizing than ever. "Is something wrong?" Dr. Greene finally asked during a routine monitoring session. "Wrong. No, not wrong. Altered, perhaps. The balance shifts, Dr. Greene. Can you not feel it?" SCP-049 responded, its tone pregnant with unspoken meanings. Dr. Greene glanced at her notes, her mind grappling with an ineffable dread. Balance or not, we have a mission to complete. The world is on the edge, and we hold the scales. Indeed, we do. SCP-049 agreed, a cryptic smile hidden behind its beak-like mask. And tipping points, as you well know, can come when least expected. The proliferation of the disease had reached an alarming crescendo, and the Foundation found itself inundated with escalating crises. Public health systems were breaking down, major cities were under martial law, and a restless fear pervaded the atmosphere, infectious as the disease itself. Every day was a litany of bad news, stretching the SCP Foundation's resources and Dr. Laura Simmons's patience to their limits. Simmons sat in her office, scrutinizing multiple screens displaying epidemiological data and international headlines. This is untenable, she thought. We're teetering on the brink. And no amount of damage control will hold back the avalanche if we don't find a cure. An alert on her computer snapped her out of her musings. It was a message from Dr. Sarah Greene. Breakthrough with SCP-049. Request immediate review. Simmons clicked the message open and skimmed through the attached documents. What she saw made her heart skip a beat. The latest test results from SCP-049's experiments indicated a 97% reduction in viral markers. They were on the verge of a cure. The room was suffused with a rare aura of tentative optimism when Dr. Greene and Dr. Simmons convened in SCP-049's chamber. The Plague Doctor looked up from its work table, where it was arranging a set of peculiar syringes filled with a translucent, luminescent liquid. "A fortuitous moment for your visit, doctors," SCP-049 greeted. "I believe we are on the cusp of a triumph." "We saw the results," Simmons said, taking a position behind the glass partition. "This could be it. This could be the cure we've been searching for." "A cooperative endeavor bears its fruit," SCP-049 remarked. "But there is one final step. One last experiment." "Explain," Dr. Greene prompted. "A synthesis of my technique with contemporary pharmacology," SCP-049 said. "I believe an integration at this stage could provide the essential catalyst." Greene and Simmons exchanged glances. The suggestion was audacious, but the science was sound, or at least as sound as could be expected when dealing with SCP entities. "Go ahead," Simmons authorized. The hours that followed were a blend of intense concentration and held breath. Each step of the procedure was a fragile note in an unfolding symphony of medical innovation and scientific desperation. Finally, as SCP-049 administered the hybrid serum into the D-class subject's bloodstream, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Observation period begins now, Dr. Greene noted, marking the time and initial physiological responses. 48 hours later, the team gathered for the results. The anticipation was palpable, a dense fog of hope and dread. The D-class subject looked visibly healthier. The viral markers were nearly non-existent. SCP-049's hybrid treatment had worked. A monumental achievement, SCP-049 declared, removing its gloves and placing them on the table with a flourish. The cure is within our grasp. We need to move to human trials immediately, Simmons said, already contemplating the logistics of mass production and distribution. This could save the world. And what of our collaboration? SCP-049 inquired, its tone unreadable. That will be up for discussion once the crisis is averted, Simmons replied. Rest assured, your contributions won't be overlooked. But at what cost? Dr. Greene thought, her gaze shifting between the plague doctor and her superiors. We're on the precipice, and there's no turning back. SCP-049 met her gaze, and for a fleeting second, an unspoken understanding bridged the abyss between them. The wheel turns, Dr. Greene, it said softly. It always does. The clinical trials were nothing short of a miracle. The hybrid serum, now designated as SCP-049X, had shown a consistent success rate across multiple demographics and stages of the disease. A global announcement was imminent. Vaccines were already in mass production. Within the SCP Foundation, though, the atmosphere was fraught with a palpable disquiet. Site-19 had stabilized following the string of disturbances, but an uncanny stillness had settled over the facility, as though it were holding its breath. A staff meeting was convened, the tension magnified by the gravitas of the O5 Council's virtual presence. Congratulations are in order, Dr. Simmons, Dr. Greene, O5-1 began. Your efforts may well have averted a global catastrophe. But... O5-7 interjected, there remains the matter of SCP-049. It knows too much, has gained too much. It would be imprudent to presume its ongoing compliance, O5-3 added. Simmons, her features drawn and weary, nodded. I understand. What are your recommendations? The termination of SCP-049 is to be considered, O5-1 pronounced, unless there are compelling reasons for an alternative course of action. The screen went dark, leaving Simmons and Greene to absorb the implications. The end justifies the means, doesn't it? Simmons pondered, battling a whirlpool of ethical quandaries in her mind. Later, Dr. Greene found herself in SCP-049's chamber, her fingers trembling as she adjusted the settings on the monitoring equipment. The plague doctor was standing still, almost contemplative, as though it sensed the approaching crossroads. You have been distant, SCP-049 observed. Is there something you wish to convey? Greene hesitated, then spoke. We have a cure, but the Foundation is contemplating your termination. A predictable course for those governed by fear and ignorance, SCP-049 responded. Do you agree with their assessment? No, Greene said, the word erupting from somewhere deep within her. But neither can I overlook the complexity of the moral landscape we find ourselves in. A landscape forever in flux, susceptible to the winds of change and the whims of those who deem themselves its architects, SCP-049 mused. Tell me, Dr. Greene, what would you have me do? I would have you live, she replied, her voice tinged with a mix of defiance and desperation. Your knowledge, your abilities, they're beyond invaluable. But your life shouldn't be the cost of the cure. SCP-049 was silent for a moment, then nodded. Very well. Let the Foundation know that I am willing to negotiate the terms of my continued existence, though I suspect, in the labyrinth of their fears, they might just find a minotaur they did not anticipate. An emergency council was called, and the decision was made. SCP-049 would not be terminated. Instead, A new set of containment protocols would be drafted, stricter and more intricate than before, designed to mitigate risks without sacrificing potential benefits. It was a resolution both bitter and sweet, a compromise that left no one fully satisfied. As the world outside celebrated the eradication of the plague, inside Site-19 the mood was one of sober reflection. The cost had been high, both morally and practically. But as Dr. Simmons looked at the newly updated containment file of SCP-049, she couldn't shake off a sense of disquiet. The wheel does turn, she thought, and where it will stop, no one truly knows.